Silence, that word that makes you so uncomfortable when someone mentions it. And right now, as you read this, there is something eating you up inside, something you don't dare admit out loud. You prefer to be alone. Not because you're antisocial, not because you hate people, but because something inside you viscerally rejects the idea of receiving visitors, of sharing your space, of pretending enthusiasm when the doorbell rings. And the worst part is that you feel guilty about it. You've been told your whole life that being sociable is a sign of mental health, that isolating yourself is cowardly, that you need others to be happy. A lie. The biggest lie you've been sold is that solitude is an illness that needs to be cured. What if I told you that what really needs to be cured is your addiction to other people's noise? Every time you accept a visit you don't want, every time you open your door with a forced smile, you're betraying yourself. It's not politeness, it's cowardice disguised as courtesy. Because deep down you know that those 2, 3, 4 hours you are about to lose are not truly shared time, they're stolen time. Time you will never get back, time you could have used to be with yourself, in that stillness you're so afraid to admit you need. And here is what no one tells you. People who have begun to awaken spiritually don't reject visits out of arrogance. They reject them because they've understood something fundamental that most still don't grasp. They've discovered that human presence, in its most common form, is not companionship, it's distraction. It's mental noise disguised as connection. Eckhart Tolle expressed it brutally when he said that most people do not live in the present. They live trapped in the mind, in a past that no longer exists and in a future that never arrives. So what are they sharing with you when they visit? Not their presence, but their absence of consciousness, their absence of stillness, their absence of truly being there. Think of the last visit you received. How much time did they actually spend being present? How long were they without checking their phone, without repeating the same stories, without projecting their personal dramas into your living room? The answer makes you uncomfortable because you know it was little or none. Most human interactions are monologues disguised as dialogues, where each person waits for their turn to vomit their thoughts without actually listening to what the other is saying. There is no exchange, only discharge. And you, who have begun to value silence, who have started to inhabit your own inner space, feel that discharge as an invasion. It's not that you're intolerant, it's that your system no longer accepts the emotional toxicity you once mistook for friendship. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Spiritual awakening makes you incompatible with collective unconsciousness. And collective unconsciousness manifests in those visits where people arrive loaded with complaints, gossip, judgments, stories about people you don't even know and don't care about. They come to tell you about the traffic, about the boss who mistreats them, about the partner who doesn't understand them, about the world that's gone wrong. And they expect you to participate, to add your own narrative of suffering, to validate their victimization. But something in you can no longer do that, not because you're superior, but because you've seen the trap. You've seen that all that mental theater is optional, that the suffering they share is not real. It's a story they tell themselves over and over until the story becomes their identity. And here comes what you're afraid to admit. When you refuse to participate in that theater, when you no longer feed other people's drama, they perceive you as cold, distant, strange. They tell you that you've changed, and they're right, you have changed. You've stopped being the echo of their unconsciousness. You've refused to be the mirror where they project their pain. And that, to them, is unacceptable, because if you don't participate in their game, they are forced to face something they don't want to see, that all their suffering is self-imposed, that their drama is a choice, that they could at any moment simply stop. But stopping means facing the void, that void you no longer fear, because you've learned that the void is not empty. It is full of pure presence. Tolle speaks of the pain body, that energetic entity that lives inside every unconscious human being, feeding on emotional suffering. That pain body needs drama to survive. It needs conflict. It needs stories of injustice and victimization. And when someone visits you with their pain body activated, what they're really doing is seeking fuel. They want you to react, to be outraged with them, to side with them, to add wood to the fire. And if you don't, if you remain in peace, their pain body feels threatened because peace is its natural enemy. That's why visits become uncomfortable, not because you're unfriendly, but because your stillness reflects their chaos. Your silence amplifies their internal noise, and that terrifies them. Do you know what's most ironic? That the people who criticize you for preferring to be alone are the same people who can't stand being with themselves. That's why they need constant visits, plans, activities, noise, anything that distracts them from that inevitable encounter with their own being. Because when you're alone, without distractions, without screens, without empty conversations, you face yourself. And most people run from that as if it were death itself. They prefer external noise over internal silence because silence forces them to look at what they've been avoiding their entire lives, that they don't know who they are, that they've built their identity on roles, on titles, on stories others told, them, that without all that noise, without all those labels, nothing remains, or so they believe. But you've discovered something different. You've discovered that in silence there is no emptiness, there is fullness, that when all external voices fall quiet, something deeper emerges, something that was always there but that the noise kept you from hearing. That voice that is not a voice, that presence that needs no words, that pure consciousness that simply observes without judging. That is what you seek when you reject visits. You're not seeking isolation, you're seeking real connection. Connection with yourself, with that dimension of your being that does not depend on social roles or external approval. And here is the paradox that few understand. Only when you are truly alone can you be truly accompanied. Only when you stop trying to complete yourself through others can you discover that you were never incomplete. Visits interrupt that process. Every doorbell is a call back to the world of form, to the world of the ego, to the world where you have to be someone instead of simply being. And the one who has tasted the freedom of being nobody, of not having to play any role, of existing without a mask, does not want to go back. Not out of selfishness, but out of spiritual survival. Because every time you return to the social game, something in you dies a little. That spark of presence you had cultivated in solitude fades under the weight of expectations, of superficial conversations, of the need to be pleasant, interesting, entertaining. And you return exhausted, not physically, but energetically, as if something essential had been drained from you. And the worst part is that you can't even explain it. If you try to tell someone that visits drain you spiritually, they'll look at you as if you're crazy. They'll say you need therapy, that you're isolating yourself dangerously, that human contact is essential. And they're right, human contact is essential. But there is an abyss between conscious human contact and unconscious human noise. Conscious contact nourishes, unconscious noise devours. The former is rare, the latter is epidemic, and most people only know the latter. That's why they don't understand your refusal. They confuse quantity with quality, physical presence with real presence. Tolle explains that the greatest obstacle to spiritual awakening is not evil nor ignorance, but identification with the mind. When you are identified with your mind, You believe you are your thoughts, your emotions, your stories. And when someone visits you from that state of identification, what they bring is not themselves. They bring their mental character. They bring the successful one who needs you to admire their achievements, the suffering one who needs you to validate their pain, the opinionated one who needs you to agree with their judgments. And all these characters are fabrications of the ego, masks hiding the true, being underneath. So what's the point of a visit where no one is truly present? What's the point of opening your door to characters instead of people? Here comes the brutal part. Most of your relationships are not relationships. They are unconscious agreements where each person plays a role for the other. You are the listener, the non-judgmental confidant, the welcoming host, and you accepted those roles because they gave you a sense of identity, purpose, belonging. But now that you are awakening, those roles are too small for you. They suffocate you. And when you try to take them off, when you try to simply be without performing anything, people feel betrayed because you are no longer fulfilling your function in their mental movie. You are no longer the character they need you to be. And that generates rejection, resentment, abandonment. That's why many who awaken spiritually end up alone, not because they choose isolation, but because they refuse to keep participating in relationships based on roles. They prefer authentic solitude to fake company. And solitude, when consciously chosen, is not solitude, it is freedom. It is the space where you can finally breathe without having to adjust yourself to anyone's expectations. It is the laboratory where you can experiment with your own being without external judges. It is the temple where the sacred can manifest without interruption. But society has programmed you to fear that freedom. You've been taught that you need constant validation, that your worth depends on how many people surround you, on how many invitations you receive, on how many plans you have. And as long as you believe that, you'll keep opening the door to visits you don't want, to interactions that drain you, to relationships that pull you away from yourself. Because deep down you're afraid of what you'll find if you stay alone, afraid that maybe you're not as interesting as you thought, that maybe your life doesn't have as much meaning as you believed, that maybe everything you are is a social construction with no real substance. And that fear is legitimate because it's true. Everything you think you are is a construction. Your name is a label others gave you. Your profession is a role you chose or were forced into. Your tastes, your opinions, your beliefs, everything was learned, taught to you, sold to you. None of that is truly you. So who are you when all of that is removed? That is the question solitude forces you to face. And it is terrifying, but it is also liberating. Because when you discover you are none of what you thought you were, you also discover that you can be anything. Or better yet, that you don't need to be anything at all. That simply being is enough. Visits steal that opportunity from you. Every time someone enters your space, they bring with them their expectations of who you should be. And automatically, without realizing it, you start adjusting yourself. You become more animated or more serious, depending on who it is. You filter your words, modulate your tone, perform a version of yourself that you think that person expects. And in that process, you lose yourself. You fragment yourself. You stop being one and become many, each adapted to a different audience. And at the end of the day, when everyone is gone, you're left exhausted, wondering who you really are when no one is looking. Eckhart Tolle speaks of inner space, that space of stillness where consciousness can simply rest in itself. That space cannot be cultivated in the midst of noise. It needs silence, it needs solitude, it needs uninterrupted time. And visits, no matter how well-intentioned, are interruptions. They are invasions of that sacred space where your true being is emerging. That's why you reject them instinctively. It's not antisocial, it's spiritual self-preservation. It's protecting the most valuable thing you have, your connection with your essence. And here's what people don't understand. Not all human connections are nourishing. Some are toxic, others are neutral, and only a few are truly enriching. But we've been taught to treat all relationships as if they were sacred, as if rejecting any social interaction were an unforgivable sin. And that is absurd. Not all human contact deserves your energy. Not all conversations deserve your attention. Not all visits deserve your time. And learning to discern between what nourishes and what devours is one of the most important skills of spiritual awakening. Awakened people do not reject humanity. They reject unconsciousness. They don't avoid connection. They avoid superficiality. They don't run from love. They run from drama. And most of what passes for social connection is nothing more than collective drama, an exchange of complaints and mutual validations that lead nowhere. It's cheap entertainment that distracts from real inner work. And one who has tasted depth no longer tolerates the surface. One who has touched silence can no longer bear hollow noise. One who has felt true presence can no longer pretend to be interested in masks. That's why you feel different. That's why casual conversations bore you. That's why social gatherings exhaust you. It's not that you're superior, it's that you're operating on a different frequency. And when someone of lower frequency enters your energetic field, there is a clash. They lower your vibration or you raise theirs. And most of the time, you are the one who ends up lowering, because maintaining a high frequency in the presence of massive unconsciousness requires a mastery you have not yet attained. That's why solitude becomes your refuge. Not because you can't handle people, but because you are still learning to maintain your center in the midst of others' chaos. And that's okay, it's part of the process. Spiritual awakening is not a single event, it's a gradual transformation. And in the early stages, you need to protect yourself. You need time alone to integrate what you're discovering. You need distance from noise to hear the truth. Visits can wait, social plans can be cancelled. Your spiritual evolution cannot, because if you postpone it to please others, you are betraying yourself at the deepest level. You are choosing social comfort over spiritual liberation, and that is a choice you will pay dearly. So next time you feel guilty for not wanting to receive visitors, remember this: you owe your space to no one. Your home is not a hotel where anyone can come and go as they please. Your time is not a public resource available to whoever requests it. Your energy is not obligated to be poured over anyone who demands it. You have the sacred right to protect your peace. And if that means saying no, then say no. Without explanations, without justifications, without apologies. Because the people who truly understand you won't need explanations, and those who don't understand you don't deserve your energy trying to convince them. The spiritual path is solitary by nature, not because you exclude others, but because few can walk beside you without pulling you back into unconsciousness. And that's okay. You don't need crowds, you need depth. You don't need quantity, you need quality. And if that quality means spending most of your time with yourself, then that is exactly what you should do. Because at the end of the day, the only company that truly matters is your own. And when you learn to be at peace with yourself, when you discover that your own presence is full enough, visits stop being a necessity and become what they always should have been, a conscious choice, not a social obligation.